to improving relationships between nations and improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. Ships to Shores aims to encourage contemplation about the current relationships between Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities as First Peoples, as Canadians, as members of coastal communities, and as people in the marine sector. So a little bit of background on Ships to Shores. So Ships to Shores is a cross-country initiative created by the Broadreach Foundation in Toronto with support from the Government of Canada and in partnership with many other community organizations. The project aims to engage at least 2,000 youth between the ages of 7 and 30 across Canada in activities focused on the Canadian marine sector through four streams: arts and culture, economic activities, civic engagement, and history and heritage. Youth will participate in digital activities where they will share knowledge and culture, build skills in entrepreneurship and leadership, and create an increased sense of belonging. And if you are on this call and you're between the ages of 12 and 30, you may be eligible to apply for our Sailing Access Fund, which is a bursary program designed to support youth accessing tall ship sail training in summer 2021. We do prioritize financial need, and we also really want to encourage first-time sailors to apply. So you can head to our website, shipstoshores.ca, to learn more. And before we get to why we're here today, I'm also going to alert you to a survey that we have. I will be sharing the link in the chat when it's done, and I'll also send out an email. It's an anonymous survey. It just takes a couple of minutes, but it helps us to continue this type of programming and see how we can improve what we're doing. So now I'm going to introduce our panelists who were so wonderful enough to agree to speak on this panel with us today. So first we have Jillian Adams, who's joining us from Finland, and it's 11:32 p.m. in the evening for her. So thank you for staying up to join us. So Jillian is a project engineer with Aker Arctic Technology. She has an undergraduate degree in mechanical engineering, and in 2016, she moved to Finland to pursue a Nordic master's in maritime engineering, allowing her to specialize further in the area of ship design while also being able to travel through the Nordic countries. Next, we have Suzanne Appleton, who is a commander in the Royal Canadian Navy in the Naval Technical Officer occupation, a former trainee with Toronto Brigantine, or Briggs as it's now known. Some of her career highlights include operations at sea, representing Canada at NATO, advancing women and BIPOC in STEM, and being part of an award-winning project team. Third, we have Danielle Doggett, who's the founder and CEO of Sail Cargo. She was named by the Royal Institute of Naval Architects as one of the most influential women in the industry of the past century. She has worked on large projects in countries like the Netherlands and Germany. As captain of schooner Ruth, which is the flagship of Barbados, she wrote and implemented the launch, which happens to be the largest ship to be launched in the history of the country. Fourth, we have Libby Drew, who is the ferry operator for the Frontenac Howe Islander based out of Kingston. She studied film and media at Queen's University, where she still hosts a weekly dance music radio show, which is really cool. But she instead chose to pursue a career on ships. So throughout her 17 years in the marine sector, she has worked for such organizations as Tall Ships America, Sisters Under Sail, and Class Afloat. At the job she currently has, she's the only woman working on the ferry, but she hopes to see that change soon. And finally, we have Beatrice Simas, who is our youngest panelist today. So she is a Chief Petty Officer second class with the Royal Canadian Sea Cadet Corps in Milton. Beatrice joined the Navy League Cadets in 2012 and graduated to the Royal Canadian Sea Cadets in 2015. And she joined the Milton branch in 2019 and took on the position of Guard Commander and led her guard during the Remembrance Day ceremonies in Milton. She's also the founder, Sea Cadet member, and instructor at the new NLCC Adventure, a Navy League Cadet Corps program for cadets ages 9 to 12. She is currently finishing her high school studies and hopes to pursue a degree in arts and art history at the University of Toronto this fall. So thank you everyone for joining us, all of the panelists. So today, as all of you know, is International Women's Day, which is a global holiday celebrating the achievements, socioeconomic achievements, cultural achievements, political achievements of women. So today we really want to take the opportunity to celebrate some of the incredible women in our sector who've been in the sector for a long time or who are just getting into the sector. We also want to discuss how to improve women's experiences in the industry and encourage more women to get involved, because it is well known that globally the marine sector is lacking in women's representation. So according to the World Maritime Organization, less than 2% of seafarers worldwide are women, and of that 2%, 94% are working in the cruise ship industry. And I want to be clear that I think women should be included in this industry just because. There shouldn't be a justification or a reason. We shouldn't have to provide evidence for why women's involvement in this sector is important. We just think that it is. So today, this discussion is about celebrating achievements. It's about sharing experiences, both good and bad. It's about learning, but it's also hopefully about inspiring. And if there are young women in the call who have thought about a career in the sector, but have never really known how to get there, or if they've never thought about it, maybe this will motivate you to look into it. So I'm going to start by asking the panelists how you got into your careers, or how you got into the Sea Cadets. What inspired your love of the water or ships? Yeah, what was the thing that really pushed you into it? And anybody can start first. Shall I?
All right. I'll go. So I guess my love of the marine environment started from a young age. I used to travel to Nova Scotia every summer to visit family, so we were always out by the sea. And then in high school, I sailed with Briggs as well, all the way through there. And then that just sort of being on the Great Lakes and exploring all the fabulous places that are along the shorelines there really kind of, that was it. That was when I decided it was going to be a thing now.
Libby, can I go to you?
Sorry. Yeah, similar to Jillian, I started on St. Lawrence 2 when I was about 14. I wasn't like really enthusiastic about it. In fact, my mom really pushed me into it. And after like the first week on board, I fell in love with it. Like it was mostly just like the community, like being on a boat, like doing things that are tough, challenging yourself, but like doing it with a bunch of people. And yeah, and it just kind of kept on going from there. And that's when I got involved with Tall Ships America, and like the opportunities on tall ships especially just beget more and more opportunities and more sailing. So yeah, and it kept on going from there.
Awesome.
I'll just jump in. Libby and I had very similar start. Also, I'm from St. Lawrence 2, I was St. Lawrence 2 alumni. And it's funny, I didn't know that Libby was apprehensive actually to start, because I didn't want to go either. And my grandmother, I don't want to say forced me, but I remember on the first day I wore a wide brim hat so I could look down and no one would see me. Like, that's how shy I was. But definitely starting on the Great Lakes and just appreciating those waterways was the first for me.
I've heard a lot of stories of grandmothers getting their grandkids into tall ship sailing. I'm wondering what the connection is there. Suzanne?
So I was not the most, nice teenager. And my parents really tried to, find a way for me to just fit into a group. And so they sent me to Briggs in Toronto. And it was really hard. And I was like, your time is just consumed. You don't have time to really mess about. But I mean, you mess about in a good way, in a Briggs way, right? So it's pretty fun. It was really, really cool to meet a group of people that just kind of accepted you and kind of guided you in how to take care of a tall ship, how to sail it, why sailing was so much fun. And so you just kind of fall in love with that. And then I told my parents that I was not gonna, I was finishing high school. I was not gonna go to university or, post secondary school. And I was gonna tour around the world as crew on tall ships. And they said no. And then I looked around at my options, and the military provided some free education. So it's a pretty good deal. And Mira, you've heard this before, so I apologize if I sound like a broken record, but I think it's just a great program. and they really appreciate all of the experience that you get out of programs like St. Lawrence 2 and Briggs and Ship to Shores. So they accepted me for better or for worse, and I went to the Royal Military College of Canada, did my undergrad there, and also got some training as a naval technical officer in the summers, because you do the academic year and then the summer you do your naval officer training, and then that's how I got into it.
Wow. I like that your parents were just like, no.
Yeah, no. You're gonna go do something or else you're gonna get in trouble. So
yeah. And so finally we come to Beatrice, who is with the Sea Cadet Corps.
So I've been involved basically since I was born, through my dad, who's been in cadets since, before I was born. But for me, I actually started in the cadet program at 9 years old. I started at NLCC Revenge in Mississauga as, just an entry-level Navy League cadet. And it turns out I really liked it. I excelled in the program and then moved on to Sea Cadets. And yeah, that's basically where it started. So it's definitely a family thing in this house. And yeah, that's where the story starts, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So I think the logical next question for me is to just hear a little bit about your job and your day-to-day and what you do. And all of you are in different aspects of the industry. So it'll be really exciting, I think, for other people who've never really thought of these careers, to see what it's like. And Beatrice, if I could start with you, just because I think some people might not necessarily know what the Sea Cadets do and what the program is like, and how you could get involved. And maybe there's young people on the call who might be really interested in it.
Yeah, sure. So the cadet program is a youth program that has military values such as discipline, uniformity and stuff like that. So my job right now, I was just promoted a couple of weeks ago, actually. So right now I'm the training chief, at my corps, and my job is to basically come up with ideas on how to, have new, especially in this environment, new way that's engaged while having the military values still in place. It's a little bit difficult online, as some of the values come in forms of drill, uniform, which is hard to check through virtual environment. But yeah, so Cadets is a youth program for ages 9 to 12, which is Navy League, or 12 to 19. And I totally recommend it to anyone. It's very helpful for leadership, discipline, and it definitely gives a sense of unity. So yeah.
Awesome. So Jillian, what about you? What's your day-to-day life like as an engineer?
I feel like my day-to-day is probably the most boring of everyone on the panel, because I sit at a computer most of the day and do calculations and drawings. So I'm specifically a structural engineer. So I work on designing the hull of the ship and figuring out how big the frames need to be if an icebreaker is going to smash into a large piece of ice. So that's my kind of day-to-day work. And then I also, another part of my job is to work on ice load monitoring systems. So these are systems that get installed on the hull of the icebreakers and monitor the loads that the ship is encountering when it's breaking the ice and going through different types of ice features. And that will ultimately, part of my job is there's some field work involved with that. So I was supposed to actually be going to the Arctic on a ship to test out a system and do their ice trials for a new build ship. But because of all of the craziness that was the world last year, that's been postponed. But hopefully I'll be getting to go to Antarctica next January to follow up on that.
So that's really cool. That's not boring
I'm pretty excited about that, but that only happens maybe once every few years. Most of it is just sitting behind a computer, but that's what the big lead up is.
Libby?
Yeah, so my day to day, work on the Frontenac Islander. So it's a small cable ferry, 15 cars. It runs 24/7, which is like not very common. It's about a 6-minute trip across. So it's not like you get a lot of downtime. Most of the time in between a trip is like either collecting money if you're working deck, doing engine checks, checking the winch, like maintaining the sheaves, or torching, keeping the ice off of things. Or if you're driving the boat, you're driving across, come down, load the boat, do a bunch of Tetris, try to make sure you're balanced out in weight. And yeah, but it's good because it's a lot of like interacting with the public, which with COVID has been kind of nice to actually see people's smiling faces coming over, and you see the same people every day, and then there's also new people. So it's kind of good in that it's like a shore-based boat job, which is like difficult to find. Like I usually just go on tall ships and do big long trips or go places with like a small crew. But yeah, it's interesting. Like even though you're just doing the same 6-minute trip across and back every single day, like you have lots of people and lots of wildlife, lots of swans, birds.
So how many trips would you make in a day?
Like it's a 12-hour shift usually, so like maybe 40 or so, like depending on how fast you go. I guess like how much traffic, like on a night shift, again, because you're open all the time, it really depends on if it's a weekend or a holiday, if people are having people over. But yeah.
Awesome. And we'll move to Danielle next.
Hi. Well, my day-to-day is actually also not really on boats. I'm working at this shipyard, our jungle or mangrove shipyard here in Costa Rica. And I'm also mostly behind the computer. Although if anyone has seen photos, you can see that we're very close to boats and ships. But my primary task day-to-day is investor relations. So we're always seeking funding and investment in our projects, which I won't call crazy publicly. Oh, wait. And I'm running the build of it with other people as well. So the project, we have a team of up to 35 plus people here at the shipyard that we work with every single day. And at the same time, we actually have a growing nonprofit branch. So the shipyard itself is a community nonprofit center. So we're also doing things like boat building and blacksmithing courses and things like that. But basically my day-to-day is kind of running around and trying to help and guide and facilitate everybody else doing their job. Yeah, so that's pretty much what I do day-to-day. And a lot of social media and talking and explaining. So that's my job.
And you do it in such a beautiful location as well.
Yeah, it's not bad here. Costa Rica is really beautiful. I can recommend it highly.
And Suzanne.
So my day-to-day these days is also behind a desk, and it's got a little bit in common with what everyone else has said. So a little bit of calculations like Jillian, a little bit of Tetris like Libby, a little bit of explaining and talking to people like Danielle. And right now I'm doing a little bit of IT projects in support of our Navy, and then I'm moving into a new job this summer. So in the Navy, we get new postings, what we call postings, and essentially you get assigned to a new job and you perform new duties every 2 or 3 years. And so the new job that I'm going to is with a project team for our future fleet for the Canadian Surface Combatant. And so that's the warship that's going to be replacing our current fleet of frigates. So that'll be very interesting and a little bit more within my realm of expertise as a marine engineer.
Will you have to move for that, or do you get to stay in the same place?
That's a good question. So some jobs you do have to move for it. But for this job, I'm not going to have to move. For marine engineers in the Navy, at a certain level, a lot of the jobs are in Ottawa because that's where a lot of the projects and equipment program management are run out of.
Okay. So, but before you joined, before you got to this rank, how much would you say you were moving around?
I moved around quite a bit up until I finished my head of department tour. That was about almost 10 years ago. And then once you're done your head of department, so that's when you're the head of an engineering department on a warship, on a major warship, then you most of your jobs after that are land-based in support of the fleet.
Okay. So since today it's about celebration, obviously, so I'd like to ask the panelists, what is your favorite thing about your job, or your most like memorable day at your job where you were like, wow, I can't believe I get to do this for a living, or I can't believe I get to do this, Beatrice, in high school, and yeah, just what are like some of the most incredible moments that you've had and that really made you excited and grateful to be in your position? And anyone can jump in.
I'm just going to jump in and just say the answer that half of us might be thinking. Dolphins. I'm kidding, but I'm also not. But I know for myself that actually getting to work in an atmosphere, so not day to day here, but previously on tall ships and ocean going vessels, the wildlife, as Libby said. So you're literally working a shift in the open ocean, and there's dolphins and sea turtles and absolutely incredible, like whales, absolutely incredible. And I think one of my favorite encounters was with orcas, actually in the Kattegat. You can probably say it better, Jillian. But seeing orcas there, and yeah, just being that close to nature is really spectacular.
That sounds incredible.
I'll jump in. I think it's pretty fascinating that human beings are able to travel and go and seek adventures on the high seas, and to be able to do so safely. So that takes a lot of ingenuity and innovation. And the marine industry is highly regulated for better or for worse. But I like that we all support people being able to do that safely. And in my profession specifically, if something does bad happen, then we're able to help them out. We're able to to go in and see if a vessel in distress needs assistance. So I like that.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's definitely the opportunities that come with being a cadet. So I've been lucky, and I've been able to do many things with cadets, and I've been able to meet many cadets from around Ontario and around the country, as well as teach other little kids who can see themselves in me. And I think that's really important, and it's a really cool thing that I have the chance to do through cadets. But yeah, definitely the meeting new people and getting the chance to inspire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you must be very inspiring to anybody younger than you, Beatrice.
I was just gonna say, similar to Beatrice, like I love the feeling of like finding a problem and solving it, and like feeling really self-reliant on something that you would never like try ever in your life, but you're faced with it, and it's like a challenge that you have to overcome. And then also seeing other people that you're training like go through that same sense of like accomplishment, that you don't really get the opportunities because you can always call someone. Like you're never like on land, there's so many like support systems to make it so that you never really have to challenge yourself or like learn new skills. So just like gathering skills and like asking people, like learning things constantly, like you're always learning, I find. So
right, when you're on the water, you have to rely on yourself a lot of the time.
Better or worse, but yeah.
Yeah, I guess mine sort of stems a bit from Libby's point there. And so from my side of the engineering side of ships, we're trying to shove an entire, they compare cruise ships to, a whole city. Ours aren't quite as extensive as that, but it's still a self-sufficient system that needs to, for icebreakers, they need to go up to the high latitudes and down to the Antarctica, and they're normally the only ship that's around. So they really have to, as a structural engineer, it's very important that that we're confident that they can withstand anything that they'll encounter in their working environment. So I think some of the most rewarding things that I've come across have been where I've spent hours trying to solve a problem behind a computer and then actually seeing it implemented in the ship design when it gets built, and seeing firsthand the actual work that I've done come to life, because it's normally in shipbuilding, it's a very slow process. So it's not, look at it one day, solve it the next kind of thing. It's a long process, and then it's a long build process. And at least with icebreakers, there's normally only one of that ship built, essentially. And so it's pretty rewarding to see it when it actually happens.
I can imagine. So I didn't want to make this conversation too negative because it's International Women's Day and we want to be inspiring and be motivating. But like I said at the beginning, we all know that, it's really difficult for women to enter the sector. And there's lots of issues that women face as they try and consider a job in the sector. So if you guys could just talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you've experienced that you think are specific to being a woman as you've kind of made your journey. Beatrice, maybe you can talk a little bit about how you think things have shifted, as somebody who's kind of at the beginning of her career or getting into it. But what are some of the challenges you've experienced as you've tried to, get to where you are?
Yeah.
I don't, sorry.
Oh, Marguerite, hello.
I was hoping to jump in here for a second. You all know me as a disruptor, those who do know me. Would you be open to extending this part of the conversation to all guests on this phone call so we can all learn from each other to maybe more succinct way? Because this is a very important change opportunity for us. So maybe more of us could share those experiences after the panelists go first. Those who wish to, of course.
Sure. Yeah, if anybody would like to jump in as well after the panelists speak about their experiences, feel free. You can also post it in the chat if you're not comfortable unmuting yourselves.
So for me, I don't think it's so much the discrimination towards women. The military does try to be as inclusive from my experience, but I think it's more of an issue of uniformity. For me, my personal experience in cadets, we do have the idea of seeing everyone as the same. So there's no, oh, this person, it's all a cadet. That can be good. I also feel that it can, bring up some issues. So for me, more of a smaller example is the lack of women's uniforms. For me, in my almost 10-year career in cadets, I've never had women's uniform pieces. I've always had men's pants, men's boots, men's gun shirt, which is the shirt that has a square neck, which can also have issues for women, especially if bending down towards it. I think that's more of the issue, is the uniformity, is seeing everyone as the same. Because reality is, while we'd like to see everyone the same, it's just not feasible, right? For example, I would prefer to have, a uniform catered to me, one that will fit me and will meet my needs. So I think the program is improving and is trying to improve and be more inclusive. So a change that happened recently was the allowing of ponytails and instead of the braids and buns, which was the standard before. I think there's still a long way to go in terms of making sure all those that identify as women can be included. So that includes everyone. So that's
that reminds me of how NASA, I don't know if you have heard this story, but NASA didn't have enough spacesuits for their women astronauts, and so they weren't able to go on spacewalks that fits them, using spacesuits that fit them. So that's a very good point you brought up, Beatrice. Feel free to, anyone can jump in.
Hi, I don't think I even need to talk. I echo Beatrice's comments. Well said, Beatrice.
Well, one thing that Danielle and I were discussing earlier is like with being a woman, there's like so few women that you represent all women's ability to do that job, right? So at least once a week on the ferry, someone will come on and be like, a girl ferry driver? And you're like, yep. So you're like, okay, I can't mess this up. Like, even though it's really bad today and like we might hit the dock a little, and then they're going to think that no woman can ever drive a boat, you know? So I think until we get to a place, like that's like a lot of pressure to like represent all women in the maritime sector at all times, because you're so visible, like especially on a ferry, so visible. Like what I would like is if there was like a lot of women hired who are just like mediocre. And there's so many men that are so mediocre, bad at their job, but like it's not like they're not bringing men's reputation in the maritime sector down. Whereas like, everyone just pins their hopes and like decision about whether women belong on like you all the time. So it's just like pressure to be perfect. You have imposter syndrome all the time because you're like, I need to know everything about my job. I need to know like the processes for every single little thing, because if I don't know it, then I'll let down all women everywhere, and I'm never gonna hire another woman again.
That's so true. And I was just thinking like women are invisible often in this sector, but you're like hyper visible if you make a mistake.
Actually, just to expand on what Libby and I were saying is that we started that part of the conversation by saying all the women we know in the maritime sector are so amazing, and they're, pardon my French, kick-ass. They're like just top of the line, you know what I mean? And then Libby followed up with saying like, we need more space for mediocre women. Like, so it was a compliment, and then we realized at the same time that maybe it's because of that added pressure, you know, you kind of condensed or pressurized into becoming like this diamond that has to be so hard and so impressive. So yeah, we need more space for mediocre women, which is not what I thought I'd be saying, but it was an interesting topic.
We also just need to be able to fail, right, without feeling badly about it. That's the thing.
Yeah.
I'd like to share with you what I posted on Facebook today. Everybody's celebrating the brilliant, intelligent, powerful, strong women. Well, what about the rest of us? Like, you know, what the hell are we, chopped liver? We can be celebrated too for all the stupid mistakes that we made, or for all the things that we didn't know. Let's go there. I really like this idea. Thank you.
I guess for me, I think what I've seen through my school degrees is that there's a lot more women coming into, I started in mechanical engineering and there was 10 girls in my class. And by the time I was a TA for the first year class when I was graduating, there was about 40 women in the class. And so there was definitely, I've seen more women there. And then I left mechanical engineering, which I thought had very few women, and went into naval architecture, and I was the only girl in my class. So then that happened. But I think one of the things I find a bit challenging is there's not really any higher level women, at least within my company or within the Finnish maritime industry that I know of. I see a lot more women kind of at my age. I'm just starting out my career. I've been working about 2 years now. So there's more women kind of in my age group that are now in the industry. But there's definitely not as much kind of senior management, at least on the technical side of things, which I find quite lacking. And I'm hoping that by the time I get up there, it'll be a different story.
And what are do you know of anything that your companies are doing to improve that? Like for instance, Libby, you said you're the only woman ferry operator. Have there been any discussions or strategies they're trying to put in place to increase women's representation?
I mean, not that I'm aware of. Like, they did hire a bunch during COVID, but during that time, there wasn't the ability, like, you couldn't take courses, right? So a lot of people that applied either already had experience in the maritime industry or were going to get that. And usually people who apply, they're like, oh, I'm a guy. I've like worked in the trades before. Like, I've seen an engine. Like, this will be perfect for me. But what Danielle and I were talking about was that they don't like look necessarily, like, women don't necessarily apply, maybe because they don't realize that the skills that they have would fit really well with the job. Like, you need to be flexible. You need to like be able to learn things. Like, you need to be like hungry to work. You need to like, yeah, like you just need to hustle kind of. And learning the mechanics and the like policies and procedures about boats, like that's pretty easy to learn. Like, anyone can learn how to do a lot of this stuff in like a week or two, you know, but yeah, like a lot of the softer skills, like being able to talk to people, being able to like react to situations and use logic and like your best judgment to troubleshoot isn't necessarily what job postings look like, right? So I think that women just don't think that that's necessarily like accessible to them or like something that they could do or would do. But I mean, yeah, I do want my like employer to start looking at different pools of like candidates. I think especially with COVID and restaurants being in such peril, like I think a lot of like servers and bartenders would make really good ferry workers. Like, they hustle, they're on their feet, you're talking to people, you're, you know, getting things done. So we'll see, maybe there'll be a shift with everyone's careers kind of being tossed up right now.
Does anyone have anything else to add to that, or?
Just well, something that I kind of learned from our own project here at the shipyard is yeah, how can we make more space for women? Typically, I think if some people know me personally, I don't usually, for better or for worse, speak out as like I'm gonna get criticized here, as an active feminist or being someone who's like, girls can, because I firmly believe that girls can and try to lead by doing and not necessarily saying. And that's a role I've been in since I was around 13, whether I knew it or not, as a girl doing something. But I learned something here from the girls at our shipyard that we work with, that we hire. And one of them was simply allowing for transition within the workplace. And so we hired one young lady from our community. Her name, it is so windy here. I'm so sorry. Things are falling over around me.
Oh no.
We hired one young lady. Her name is Yami Let, and she was a cleaning girl, which is, of course, with COVID, even more important than ever. And then one day I saw her just like, one of the guys was teaching her how to use the chainsaw. Now, she didn't have any safety gear on, and I said, that's like not appropriate at all. But she said, I really would like to learn. And now she's full-time. She's a full-time sawyer, and she's using the chainsaw all day, every day. And she's making the frames and the deck beams of this ship. And so that was a lesson that I learned, was just be aware and make space for if there is a transition that could happen. So maybe a young lady enters a cruise ship industry or on a vessel as a waitress or whatever, a more typical job that she feels comfortable entering in. But maybe as an employer, you can say, you know, you might actually enjoy working in the engine room. Do you want to just try it? And of course, there needs to be certification and training that goes along with that. But just as an employer saying, would you like to give it a try? And that's actually what I learned from Yami and from other people here.
Yeah, and keeping your eyes open for people that you know, might surprise you. So does this have to do with like poor marketing on the sector's part, that they aren't marketing themselves to show that there are so many skills required to be in this industry in any career, any pathway, but they're just not talking about those things? And I think about, Libby, when you said you know, you need to be good at communicating with each other. I feel like we don't value that as a skill. It's considered a skill that's like, it's a soft skill. It's not considered like, oh, I know how to do math, but it's a very important skill. So what do you think of how the sector markets itself to young people, but especially young women? And maybe Beatrice, you might have a specific kind of perspective on this as somebody who is trying to get into the sector.
I think it's a misconception of how women behave within the sector that may be driving other women away. So for me, I know that I've been called, in a leadership position, I've been called rude, I've been called, you know, mean, yada yada. My commands have been taken as like my yelling, as opposed to this is a command and you should follow it. So I think it's a misconception of women who are in the marine sector are, you know, rude people that are driving other women away. And if people aren't as loud as other women may be, there's this, oh, she's too soft, she can't be a leader, she doesn't have what it takes. So I think what needs to change is that any woman can succeed in this industry. It's just in her own way. She needs to, you know, she needs to find a place where she's most comfortable. So I think this narrative of, oh, loud women who know their role are pushy and rude, I think this narrative needs to change into, oh, this woman is a leader and she is very capable and did as such.
I very much agree with that. Everybody has different leadership styles, and you know, a man we know wouldn't be criticized for the same thing. But does anyone else have anything to say about the marketing piece as well? Like, you know, how are we marketing these careers to people? And is there a difference with how we market them to women versus young men, for instance, or?
I will, and I can't speak to marketing in the commercial sense, but I think that perhaps women leverage their network and communicate their interest a little bit differently than men do, and especially when it comes to career advancement. And even the discussion and the details around it are slightly different for women. People will automatically assume that, you know, family planning is first and foremost, which sometimes it can be. But it's not always the conversation that the woman wants to have at that point in her career. Maybe she's just looking for an opportunity. But I wanted to bring up that point, is that the dialogue is different. The details are different, as well as the access and leverage of networks is a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's very valid. Anyone else? And also any other participants on the call, feel free to chime in. Jess Clay, you raised your hand. Feel free to unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hi.
Nice to meet you all. I'm from the UK, and I don't know if it's different where you guys are, but I think there's a marketing problem for the sector in general. And again, I can only speak for the UK, but when my brother was looking at different colleges and different courses to go into for a career in the automotive industry, it didn't matter if you looked at maths, it didn't matter if you looked at science. Somebody said, yes, there's a job in this in the auto industry. And I don't think the maritime industry is pushed. And again, like certainly not here in the UK. And it's certainly, as a graphic designer, it was never an option, well, you could go and be a graphic designer for the maritime industry, just wasn't considered. So maybe it's an awareness of the industry in general that will normalize it for men and women.
Yeah, I think that's a great point because, yeah, sorry, Jillian, do you wanna go ahead?
No, I was just gonna follow on with exactly that point because, so I went from Briggs and then I went into, and I knew I was gonna be an engineer from a quite young age. And I had done my time in Briggs, and then I went to university, I went to mechanical engineering, and for the first 2 years, I thought, oh, I'll just do aviation engineering, because that's kind of like something I might be interested in. It's kind of similar to ships, and it wasn't really until my second year of university that I even knew that, you know, I could be a naval architect and I could be an engineer that designed ships. So I think the whole advertising to the sector, and I know, at least I think from a Canadian point of view, seeing the differences between how Canada would market kind of naval architecture programs or marine engineering programs versus how Finland does. Like Finland, there's such a higher presence of naval architecture and marine engineering and just the whole marine environment because they're so reliant on the sea. Most of the transport comes in by the sea, and they still have some pretty major shipyards here. So it's really ingrained into a lot of the culture here, whereas in Canada, I feel that it's not really as celebrated and as present. It's only kind of now that both the Navy and the Coast Guard are really starting to revamp their fleets, and so the shipyards are getting back into action. And so even when I was looking at a master's program, there was only one master's program pretty much in all of Canada that I was considering versus the multitude of programs that I could do in Europe. And even within Finland, there was more than one program here, and it's a country of 5 million versus Canada. So I think Canada might not be marketing their marine sector as well as they could be.
Well, an interesting stat I have is, I don't know the exact percentage, but there's a large percentage of Canadians that don't think of us as a maritime nation, which is interesting because both sides, lots of water. But Jess, I like your point about being a graphic designer and not thinking that there were options in the marine sector, because what are some other careers outside of math and science? There has to be tons and tons, but I feel like you would never hear about them because you just associate the sector with math and science.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I'm 33 now, and I was 30 the first time I realised or found out that you could actually work on tall ships. Like, that had never, and the UK is an island nation, and we have a very rich maritime history, but it's just ignored unless you're sort of in this little community, or if you know someone who knows someone, it opens up a whole world, but it's just sort of, it's not even discussed. I sailed a tall ship for the first time in 2018 because I had a conversation with someone who just happened to mention you can join these things. And it's such a shame, because in the time between 2018 on my first trip, which was on Morgenster, the Dutch brig, and now I quit my career as a graphic designer and now I work on tall ships. And I wish I could have got into doing something like that at a much younger age, because my bones hurt. So, you know, it's just a shame. I really wish it was pushed more. And I think there is a job for everybody in maritime. It doesn't matter what your interests are, or where your degree is, or what your forte is. You can do that on a boat or onshore supporting the boat. There's something for everyone, and it's such a shame. I wish more people knew about it.
Yeah, and that exactly, Beatrice, you're planning on studying art history. And Libby, you studied film and media. And so that just shows you that you don't have to do engineering or, you know, anything related to science. I mean, obviously, if you want to, that's amazing, but that's not a necessity to enter the sector, right?
I'd like to throw in a bit of a controversy here. Oh, sorry, Danny, you go first.
Oh, thanks, Marguerite. I was just going to say a quick thing that in response to Jess, but also in the marketing in general, something that on my mind quite a bit in the cargo or freight shipping area is that the maritime industries are typically quite secretive and remain actually, you know, in terms of who are the ship owners, what is going on, you know, sorry, I'm just going to say this because I'm not familiar with the Navy, but like, what are the Navy people doing? Like, we don't get told, you know what I mean? But really, literally, the Greek ship owners and many other ship owners, it's all secretive. Who is the name of the owners of the companies? Who are the board of directors? All these sorts of things can literally be secretive. And the offshore bank account is something that's an offshore registered company, and flag of convenience and all these things are really the shipping industry around the world has pioneered that. And the shipping industry, centuries, had some little secrets, you know, and you don't necessarily want to be marketing everything you do in terms of drug trafficking, slavery, like colonial, like there's just so the conditions, the food, the scare, there's so many things, tax evasion, that they're kind of like, no, we don't need a marketing specialist, actually. And so I think that we're still, to a certain extent, it's very much alive, that things are secretive, ship owners are secretive, offshore companies, flags of convenience. And this is something that persists today, and they don't even really want to change it. So I've been sitting in on comparable panels to this, but more geared towards the shipping industry in terms of commercial freight. And they don't want an Instagram account. You know what I mean? So that's something else as well, is what is the motivation to market or not, and then therefore what other drivers are happening behind the scenes if they do want to shift to being visibly marketable.
So this is really great, Danny, because that what you said is a preamble to what I was going to say.
Okay.
The absence of trust, the ill repute of some of those corporations were really, talk about Greeks. My dad was a seaman and a merchant mariner all his life almost. And he said they were like floating coffins. There were no safety regulations. Would you want to be on a boat like this? And then I want to share with you my personal experience. I am really delighted of the range of women who are here, but yet still, most of us are white. Let's put it this way, right? So outreach for inclusion, for recognition, appreciation, and celebration of other people, and I don't mean other, but people who are not white bread like me, it's not as good as it should be. And that's a point. And another point, I'll share with you a personal experience. I started being interested in boats when I began walking, because I happened to live in a place where sailing was the only thing you could do. It was small, it was poor, it was after the war. And when I became a teenager, I really wanted to go sailing more. And my mother said, context. Polish Christian strict upbringing. No daughter of mine is going to go into that activity, because that's a woman of ill repute. And so I had been in bad relations with my mother for a very long time. Why am I raising this? We are working in a country where there are a lot of newcomers, and there are cultural differences, and there are a lot of mothers like mine way back then, even now. And is that something that's possible to change? I have no idea.
Oh, I don't know. Does anyone want to?
I was just going to jump in and say that, like, Marguerite brought up an interesting point about intersectionality within the marine industry. And I think that we could have a whole other panel to discuss not just like feminism within the marine industry and like getting more women involved, but intersectional feminism, which is a huge topic. Like when you look at the section of women that work in the marine industry, it's very small, like 2% of worldwide. But then if you even take into that further, like how many women of color work within the marine industry, the number is even smaller. And so I think it's something to be said that, you know, there's a lot to be done when it comes to inclusion and diversity.
Suzanne, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, just to follow on to both of those excellent comments. There's something in my mind about how you know, sometimes the paths of immigration are quite violent. You know, the path of refugees are quite violent, and so, you know, in that way, that could be have a negative impact on diversity in the maritime sector, well, in Canada and worldwide. If people had a traumatic experience fleeing from a war-torn country, you know, that's something that comes to mind as well. Conversely, you know, it could also be a positive way for them to be involved in the maritime sector because they personally benefited from it, or may have personally benefited from it. It may have taken them from a bad place to a better life. And so in that way, that definitely could increase diversity in the maritime sector.
That's a very good point. Yeah, I think, yeah, Tasha, Marguerite, Suzanne, that's certainly a panel that we could convene and have a very long discussion, because it's true that if there are fewer women, there are definitely fewer women of color. And that, I would say, is probably across all sectors. We've talked a lot about, what needs to change, but I don't want the burden to feel as though it should fall to women to think, okay, what are we going to do to change it? Because it shouldn't fall to you. It's not your responsibility. What do you think that men can do? How would you feel supported by your male colleagues or superiors? Or what do you think that they can do to encourage more women to join the sector, or encourage more women to join the Sea Cadets, or whatever it is? How do you think that they can play a role? And not that I want you to feel like you have to teach them to do that either, but have you ever felt like, okay, my male colleague could have handled something better, could have helped me or supported me better? Yeah.
I can say something to this topic.
Sure.
I think when we think about what men can do, we first have to think about language and how to change the way we speak about women in the marine industry, how we support women in the marine industry. And the number one thing is that we need to listen to women. When women bring up problems, when women bring up issues that they have, the number one thing and the biggest roadblock that gets put up is that the first response tends to be, oh, well, that's not what really happens. That's not something that happens, or it's never happened to me, so there's no way that it can happen to you. So I think the first step that we need to take is that we need to listen to women. And when women bring up their experiences and share their stories, especially in platforms like this, I've seen some men log onto the call. That's step number one, is listening to the experiences of women and what women go through, or what women are celebrating within the marine industry, and kind of moving forward from that, and not expecting women to hold your hand through this process. Obviously including women in the solutions, because you can't create a solution for women without involving women. But taking the lead here and listening to us, and then taking what we say and being like, okay, now I, as the person that holds the most privilege and the most power in this relationship, I am going to make the steps towards making this better, and I'm not going to then have the emotional labor fall onto women.
Mm-hmm. Very, very much agree. Beatrice, your hand up.
I think that men have to listen more and be more understanding as a whole. Another thing that I think needs to, change in the male narrative, I guess, is, I shouldn't be listened to because I'm a woman. I should be listened to because I'm a leader, just like every other man would be listened to. I don't want the difference to be, oh, she's a woman, so she should be, respected as a woman. Why should I be respected as a woman and not as, a leader? So if a man was in the same position as myself, it would be, oh, you should listen to him because of his rank, because of his time in the program, because of his, position within the Corps. But for me, it's, oh, you should listen because, she has worked so hard to get here, and it's harder for a woman to maybe, excel at, So I think that our male counterparts should be more sympathetic to the microaggressions, I think you could say, that women endure, which could be treated as, oh, you should listen to her, she's a woman. But, that can be a little bit offensive as opposed to helpful.
Yes, definitely. Danielle?
Thank you. And I'd just like to agree with everything that's been said so far. And there's so many things that I think that I could say, or experiences I could draw on, where I could say, oh, I really wish that had been handled a little more respectfully. There's a lot. But something I try to remind myself I don't know if this is healthy or not, but that these people that we're working alongside, men, as we're describing them or as we see them, whatever, these people, whoever that is, whether it's a man or a woman, who's giving us a problem for being in the industry, because I've also had a lot of issues from women. Why are they acting like that? Do you know what I mean? And potentially for a lot of men that are in the Navy or on ships or working on tugboats, maybe they came from a family where dad was pretty tough or whatever, you know, whatever that story is. And so not being sympathetic, not saying, oh, it's okay, he probably like acts like this because of that, but understanding that this is a conversation that they are probably having for one of the first times. Mm-hmm. And potentially I've been many times the only woman on a ship, by being that potentially first woman that man has ever worked with in their industry, is new and shocking for them. And so I try to remind myself that this is something I'm working through as the only woman on the ship in this example, but also they're working through it too. And so I try to remember that depending on the case, maybe they didn't know better, or maybe they thought they were saying the right thing. And I'm not sticking up for a lot of examples here, please don't take that the wrong way. But I do think about it from the other side. I'm like, maybe I'm the only woman that's ever worked on this ship. How did they deal with that? You know, it's just an interesting thing that I think about.
No, I mean, that's absolutely a fair point. If they've never had to interact with women in that position, then it's probably like, you know, they may not know how to do or say that they don't know what the right thing to do or say is. But I also agree with your point where you said you've experienced this from women too, and women in positions of power are also in a position to be discriminatory towards women that work under them. And that's something to think about, is when there's a power imbalance, I think is also a huge, huge issue. So you have Libby who's raised a hand, and Suzanne afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, like at the job I'm currently at, even though I'm the only woman, technically all the positions on board are the same. Like it's equal work, equal pay, equal everything. So like there's really no superiors, there's seniority, but other than that, it's pretty good in that sense. What I found on other boats though is there's like a lot of gatekeeping, right? So a lot of ships that I've been on like are training ships. So you go on and you're trying to learn so you can climb the ranks. And people who are closer to the top are not going to easily give up certain things that keep them at certain ranks. Mm-hmm. So, and like this has happened with women too. Like I've heard women who are like above me be like, well, why would I teach you this? That would make me out of a job. Like, you know, like there's only so much room for women at the top. Like, why would I help you, kind of thing. So, and I think with men too, like I've experienced that where like even if you're equal, you'll suggest something and they'll just immediately shoot it down because they don't want you to challenge what they've always done or what they're used to, or like even hint that they might be doing something bad. Like, so I think that gatekeeping and that ego of like, you like, yeah, just keeping you away from the skills and like opportunities that you need to kind of get better and grow, is kind of difficult.
Yeah. But they ignore that, you know, when we're all doing well, then everybody's doing better. Suzanne?
Yeah, I would say that, you know, our success does not infringe on their success, right? And it's not a threat. I think the sooner we come to that point, the better off everyone's going to be. Yeah, there are some days where I am teaching people how to treat me, but you know, I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to kind of step outside my comfort zone. I'm normally not very confrontational at all, but to be able to stand up for myself and stand up for what other women are expecting of me, and expecting of the organization and the team as a whole. I do think that, you know, as women, we tend to try to find reasons for upholding antiquated patriarchal structures, but we don't have to. have to find excuses. We can just point to a different way of doing something without looking for a reason as to why it's occurring, right? So in that way, I think I'm just very conscious of my own energy levels, right? And what I want to point my energy to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not your responsibility to educate somebody when you realize that they have maybe acted inappropriately or if they've been disrespectful. Jillian?
I was just going to continue along with some of the thoughts there, in that I think it's also important to draw boundaries and let people know that when a boundary has been crossed, that it has been crossed, because then I've noticed this with some people on previous teams and stuff, where I was typically, like Danny said, like the only girl and probably the first girl that they've worked with in that capacity kind of thing. And so just making sure they understand also from your perspective what went wrong in that situation and how to improve it the next time they might encounter it is, I think, really important in this industry.
Yeah. Marguerite?
Yeah, so I respectfully disagree with your statement, Mira, that it's not our responsibility to educate those people who had said or done something wrong. I think that you may want to rethink it, because if we don't do that, if we don't teach our sons, our nephews, and whoever is around, professionally or personally, that they are not doing what they should be doing, well, nothing will change, or not.
I don't disagree with that, but I think I'm more on the line of what Jillian's saying, which is that you can draw a boundary for yourself, though. And I don't think it has to be your responsibility every time somebody wrongs you or disrespects you to always teach them. I think it's completely fair to say, you know what, I'm going to pull myself back from this conversation because it's too much energy for me. I'm not saying that you never should do that or you never should engage with them, but I also think I agree with Jillian, and I also agree with Suzanne, that boundaries are important. Understanding your energy is important. And sometimes it's just, it's exhausting to have to be that voice of reason for somebody else to say, this is how you should be treating me. And I think you have to know your limit and not feel like it is your responsibility. I don't think you should ever feel like it's your responsibility. I think you should do it because you've decided, I really do want to educate this person and I do really want them to improve as a colleague or a friend or a whomever. But I think it's important for us as well to understand and to recognize our own limits in doing that. Because I think if you don't set those boundaries, then that person could just keep crossing them and keep expecting you to educate them. And I don't think that that's healthy.
I agree with Mira because I think that if it always falls on women to educate people on what's going wrong, then it stays a problem for women. But if other people speak up around you, so like, let's say, for example, I'm at a workplace and somebody makes a backhanded comment to me or makes a comment to me of my gender and assumes that I don't know something because I'm a woman. If it's only me speaking up, then other people around me only see it as an issue with me. But if my male colleagues speak up and say, hey, that's not cool, we can't treat our female feminine identifying colleagues like this is wrong for XYZ, then it takes the burden off of just me as one person and then shows everybody else that this isn't just a problem because I'm a woman, it's a problem because I'm a person and you're disrespecting me. It's like I'm a person before I'm a woman and I should be treated as a person regardless of how I present my gender to other people.
So we're already at 5:40, so we've been talking for an hour and 10 minutes. Does anyone have any final comments on that section of our discussion? And then I'm going to move on to something else very quickly. But if anybody has any final comments, please chime in. Anybody from the participants?
I just had one more thing, Mira. I just want to reinforce that you don't have to wait for something bad to happen, okay? So you can have a discussion with your team or your colleagues, or even in a meeting that you're setting up, and establish those principles and those working boundaries, right? And the expectation that you would like them to watch out for it and be respectful of it as well. So you don't have to wait for something bad to happen.
That's such an excellent point, because I think it's scary for us to have that conversation before something bad has happened, but then it's even scarier to have it when something bad has happened. So it's probably better to try and have that conversation before anybody can, disrespect you in some ways, which might still happen, obviously, but I really like that point, Suzanne. So we've spent a long time talking about, the issues of the sector, the problems that women are facing. But I would like to end the conversation on a positive note. So, if you guys could talk about what are some of the most exciting advancements you've seen for women, young women as well, in the cadet program, or as engineers, or as shipbuilders, or on ferries. What are some things that you're really excited about, motivated by, that shows that, while we still have a ton of work to do, that we are moving in a positive direction?
I think one of the things I'm excited about is the community that I've seen start to kind of grow, particularly at my workplace, because when I started, there was me as an entry-level engineer and one senior level female engineer, and now we've got about 4 or 5 at my level. So I think, and I know I've had some interaction with some of the school, like for my alumni, and it's really exciting to see when more women do get involved, and when there's a really accepting community. As much as I've sometimes been the only girl, most of the men that I work with have been very welcoming and very accepting. And it's the community that gets formed, I think, in the marine sector is one of those ones that really sticks with you for the long term. So I'm really excited about the community to continue to grow.
Thank you, Jillian. Suzanne, you raised hand, and then I'll go to Beatrice after.
I just want to say that a lot of people are a lot more open to the conversation and the discussions around it, and just looking around at some of the senior leadership, it's slow, but we're seeing it slowly change. And when I've had to reach outside of the Navy community for some mentorship and guidance, there were people there. There were definitely a great group of people, women, men, that were more than willing to listen. So I like that.
Beatrice?
While there is still a very long way to go, there is this beginning of more education and more awareness being brought to the cadet program. There are a lot of, there's discussion about, pronouns, gender identity, the acceptance of LGBTQ plus members within the cadet program, which is, of course, very important. And there's more discussion. There are more women you can look to in the higher ranks. So as while I am the top of my group, there are women that are, higher at the top positions, which is very inspiring, empowering, and encouraging, because it's an example to the rest of us. So that's exciting. Yeah.
I'm happy to hear that the next generation is improving upon what was already there. Libby?
Well, this isn't necessarily from my ferry work, but specifically in tall ships, like, I don't know, maybe over the last 7 or 8 years, you see so many more queer and trans sailors on board with you and on other boats, and you're like, wow, cool, good. That means the community aren't made of all just a-holes, there are people that are carving out space and being advocates and making sure that people feel welcome enough, that there are so many crew members that are queer and trans. So there's that. And also just for me on the ferry, seeing, I have so much FaceTime with the public, but seeing little girls being hi, and really connecting with you and wanting to interact with you, and seeing that representation for them, I'm sure will, 20 years down the line, maybe make it not so difficult for them to see themselves working in the marine sector, you know, but.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Danielle, do you have anything to add?
I'm sure I do, but I'm not sure. I mean, I'm trying to think about my experience here that I've had with this project in Costa Rica is a little bit different from what I'm used to in Canada or Europe, and where I feel it's quite accepting. I'll use Canada, US, Europe. I feel that as a woman, I did not feel barriers that really stopped me. Whereas here in Central America, there is a different culture that I'm still just beginning to learn about. But there's this, they call macho culture. And when I meet people and they introduce me, it's almost every time they're like, she's a captain. She's a license. You know, and that's like the whole intro, and the people kind of can't really deal with it. That's also because there's not a very strong maritime culture here where I am right now, and so people don't generally meet a captain day to day anyway, let alone a young lady, you know, whatever. So that's another layer. But when I meet a young girl, like, you know, there's the neighbor girls here, the daughters of our employees are like 8 years old, and I do feel it's like almost my job to inspire them. And I'm like, you can do it. You're going to sail on Saba. You've been here since we started building, and we need a Costa Rican captain, and that's going to be you. And that's really, really interesting, because I think for a lot of the people here for the first time, again, because it's not a strong maritime culture in the way that we're talking, that's the first time that they've thought that. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of interesting, but it's a bit of a different context. So.
But so you're inspiring all the little girls that are down there. that are working.
Well, just even having the Costa Rican flag flying here that I can see above the bow of the ship, right above the stem, and encouraging the young women to do it. It's those kind of more than one layer where it is typically a little bit more macho culture, as well as that they've never met a captain before. There's all these layers, and I'm looking at them and telling them, no, this is your ship right here. This is your flagship, and you're going to be captain. And it's magical, actually. Like, they really light up. So it's nice. Yeah.
Well, thank you. So it's 5:47, so we've gone a little over time. But if anybody has anything else they'd like to add, not just the panelists, any of the other participants, absolutely feel free to unmute yourself or post in the chat. But I want to thank our 5 panelists, Jillian, Libby. Jillian, I'm so sorry, you can go to bed now. Libby, Danielle, Suzanne, and Beatrice for joining us today and sharing their experiences. It's been a really fruitful discussion, and I hope that we can continue this conversation further with Ships to Shores and with all of you. And yeah, so thank you so much. And Danielle, you have your hand raised, so I'll let you speak.
Not to be dorky, but speaking of marketing, I don't know, maybe Mira, you could orchestrate a group photo where we all could take a screenshot and kind of acknowledge that, because then we could encourage this from a marketing perspective.
That is a very, very good idea. So I'm going to take a screenshot. So everybody smile. Who's on camera? There we go. I got it.
And before we sign off, may I invite all of you to meet here again next year, same time, and invite some male guests. So as Paul Simas, a friend, just said, they need to hear this. They need to hear this. Okay. Thank you very much. Truly grateful.